I've been coming to Israel for 17 years now, and ever since my first trip, I've had one spot that is just my absolute favorite in the entire land. For years, I've dreamed about sharing this place with the world, and this morning, we're finally here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Elon Moreh.
Here we go.
Elon Moreh sits at the northern tip of Highway 60, known in ancient times as the Road of the Patriarchs, or as we often like to call it, the Biblical Highway. This historic route stretches north to south along the ridgeline of the Judea and Samaria mountains, the same road that was once traveled by Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, and even Jesus. Despite wars, political pressure, and attempts to erase Israel's connection to this land, God's promise remains. Standing here on Elon Moreh today, everything becomes clear. The people of Israel are back in their homeland, fulfilling the exact promise made to their father Abraham thousands of years ago. More than 4,000 years ago, God called Abraham to leave his homeland and his family to travel to a strange land. Abraham set out without even knowing his destination, and in Genesis 12, he stood here, right on this very mountaintop. Genesis 12, 6 and 7 says, Abram passed through the land to the place at Shechem, to the Oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, To your offspring I will give this land. In Hebrew, the Oak of Moreh literally translates to Elon Moreh, the very same name given to the Jewish community on this mountaintop today. Tradition, archaeology, location, and the Bible all point to this place being the very same mountain where Abraham stood in Genesis 12. All throughout history, we see a pattern of the nations continually coming against and trying to destroy Abraham and his descendants. But not only do they come against the ancient promise given to Abraham, they also come against the locations where those promises were made. One of those locations is right here in Judea and Samaria, Israel's biblical heartland, or what the world calls this place, the occupied West Bank. As believers in the Bible and the God of Abraham, coming to places such as Elon Moreh reminds us of God's unfailing promises. No matter how dark the world gets, no matter how much persecution God's people face, and no matter how much the world comes against the physical land of Israel, God's covenant is everlasting. Watching the sunrise on Elon Moreh reminds us that God's promise to Abraham, given 4,000 years ago in this very spot, is still true today. Jeremiah 33:25 says, Thus says the Lord, if I have not established my covenant with day and night, and the fixed order of heaven and earth, then I will reject the offspring of Jacob and David my servant, and will not choose one of his offspring to rule over the offspring of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For I will restore their fortunes, and will have mercy on them. One thing that so many people miss when it comes to the conversation about Judea and Samaria, the place that the world calls the West Bank, and they want to make it into a Palestinian state and take it out of Jewish hands, is the incredible depth and richness. And when I'm talking about archaeology, history, a really good example of that is the spot where we are right now, Elon Moreh. I can stop right here and we can spin around and look straight at the Tirzah Valley. This is the spot that Joshua led the children of Israel into the land. When they came out of the desert, they crossed over the Jordan River, and they came to the Mount of Blessing, Mount of Cursing, Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim. Not only that, though, but when Abraham stood here and God said, look north, south, east, and west, when he looked north, he's looking at Mount Hermon, the northern tip of Israel. When he looked south, he's looking at the Dead Sea. When he looked west, you could almost see the Mediterranean Sea from here. And if we look east, we can see the mountains of Jordan. You can't toss a rock or a stick anywhere in Judea and Samaria without touching something straight out of the Bible. And if this land were given away, these sites, archaeological sites, historical sites, and Judeo-Christian heritage sites would be completely lost forever. So the modern-day community of Elon Moreh is home to some 400 families. It was founded in 1980, and this is one of 4 Jewish communities that are in this part of Samaria. We're not in northern Samaria, but we're in central Samaria. We're about an hour north of Jerusalem, hour east of Tel Aviv, and this is one of the 4 Jewish communities that is thriving and growing and settling Israel's heartland. In case you haven't noticed, there's a constant battle for the land of Israel, especially when it comes to Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria. The world is constantly pressuring us to call this place the occupied West Bank and pushing a narrative that Israel doesn't have any rights to the land, or that they should relinquish their right to live and be sovereign and thrive and settle in these places. Did you know that after the dust settled after the War of 1967, Israel had actually liberated Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria? After defending themselves on multiple fronts, Israel found themselves once again in control of their ancient homeland, liberating it from the country of Jordan, who had occupied these areas for 19 years. Interestingly enough, between 1948 and 1967, these areas were very poor. The Arabs who lived here were oppressed by the Jordanian army, and there was very little infrastructure, and in general, no one was thriving. When the Jewish people came in and began to settle after 1967, they began to bring in infrastructure, installed water and electricity, built schools and hospitals, and in general, everyone began to thrive, both Jews and Arabs. To this day, Israel provides the water, Israel provides the electricity, Israel collects the taxes, Israel provides tens of thousands of jobs for the Palestinian Arabs who live here. At the end of the day, God's covenant given to Abraham will prevail. God promised that the entire land would be given to Abraham and his descendants forever, and that promise will never fail. As believers in God and the Bible, we cannot stand idly by, or worse still, support the idea that Israel would ever give up any part of their land. Instead, we should stand with a strong Israel, a Jewish nation that is sovereign in the entirety of their land. The sun still rises and sets over these hills, reminding us that God is faithful to his promise, and his word endures generation after generation. The people of Israel, they're back in their land, not only to survive, but to build, to grow, to flourish, and most importantly, to be sovereign in their land forever.
Did you know you can experience Israel for yourself through one of the many trips that we offer here at the Israel Guys? Meet the people, experience Israel's heartland, check out all of our different trips at theisraelguys.com.